Hello, everyone. I'm doing this interview as a follow up to a story that I had done. It's a text piece. It was called Inside India's Hidden Digital Market of Incest, Child Porn, and Misogyny. An 18-year-old boy had approached me desperately on Instagram, and a conversation with him led me into a world of something that was quite disturbing, where young boys, both young adults and even some women, were engaged in what we can call harmful sexual content, including rape videos and child sexual abuse videos. So this video is a follow up of that, and we have with us Miss Nirali Bhatia. I've also quoted Miss Nirali Bhatia in the text piece. Nirali is a counseling psychologist, certified cognitive behavioral therapist, and internet addiction therapist, specializing in cyber psychology. Cyber psychology is the study of impact of technology on human behavior and mind. She's also a TEDx speaker and has conducted workshops and training programs for corporates, organizations, educational institutes, and larger forums across the country. She's also the founder of Cyber BAP, which is an acronym of Cyberbullying Awareness, Action, and Prevention. She counsels the victims of cyber crimes, online psychological damage, and addictions. She was appointed as the psychologist for television show MTV Troll Police, and which was aired on MTV. So, thank you, Miss Nirali, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So, ma'am, I'll straight away get into the question. In my recent reporting, I found young boys being exposed to child sexual abuse material and even rape videos online. Even more disturbing was the trend of sexualizing close family members, including mothers and sisters. From your perspective, why is that this happening, and what are you s- learning from your own experience of interacting with, people who are online now, increasingly online these days?
So, Subi, I must say that you really picked up a very, very bold topic, which is also need of the hour, which is time that we speak about. See, to in a very nutshell, if I have to tell you why is this happening, I would say it is because of the anonymity that internet offers, and it's also the accessibility both. It's always available. There are multiple sources online available, and you can be anonymous. Uh, Sexual content or anything related to sexuality has always been a taboo topic, and you know how our mind works. Something which is prohibited, it's more attractive, we're more attracted towards it. So that is what now has become easily accessible thanks to the internet access that we all have, unfiltered and unmonitored access. When we talk about that, yes, it's children who are also found indulging into this. So there are multiple factors or the reasons behind this. One is of course the most common one, which is the peer pressure. If it's happening in your environment, it feels normal, it feels trending, it feels that something which is going to make me part of my peer circle, it will give me inclusion. Then the third factor also could be in terms of any content that is sexual gets immediate attention, and we are living in a world, particularly for the youth, this world is all about being the first one, being the one whose content goes viral, being the one who has more followers, more likes, more views. So it is also somewhere contributing that the content like this is getting much more of attention. Algorithms also promote it because there is, viewership is increasing. So it's a very what do you say, like a cyclic process. uh, Initially, because of the attention that it gets, the demand increases, and hence the supply also increases to fulfill that demand. So these are some of the factors that why this is now growing in young children also. Then also we cannot ignore the fact that in the online world, misogynistic content has been normalized so much in various formats. Certain, influencers have spoken about it in the way the content which the attention that it gets. So it kind of desensitizes people. and takes them away from the emotional empathy that is required towards, this kind of content and the victim people who are being victimized in this. Now, to I specifically address your question, that it's also, family members videos that we are seeing, that people are contributing. So there are three factors which contribute to this. Number one is objectification of women. It's there somewhere in our entire culture. Also, there are certain cases of grooming where young children are groomed, either by winning their trust or then later on blackmailed and then forced to take, these kind of videos unknowingly, without permission or consent from their family members, from their parents, sisters, mothers, etc. So these are some factors which could also give us an insight that why is it? Firstly, it is easily accessible because your family members are around you, you don't have to go looking for them. And then the factor also could be that because everybody else is doing, it feels normal thing to do. If one child in the group has experimented with this, maybe now that child was groomed to do this or not, we do not know. But yes, if they have done it and other and shared it, then others find it normal to do it, as in they feel okay, it's thrilling, it's exciting, and it becomes a peer inclusion point.
Yeah, so an immediate question that comes to my mind is, one is that, somebody's, as you said, accessibility is very easy when it's a family member, right? But uh, I mean, I would like to assume that we are from our families taught things or groomed in a way that we know that mothers, sisters, and close relatives, we don't naturally see them in this light, right? But is it the grooming that is and normalization? One is grooming, that because they're seeing the content online and everyone else is doing, that's there where they're getting this idea, okay, so this is also possible, that this is also what we can do. And then when they start doing it, putting it online, maybe they're getting some likes, they're being part of some community which is giving them some kind of validation as well. So yeah, you think that that is what is the grooming is happening, or it's naturally coming? That's what I'm interested.
Multiple factors to this. Grooming is where somebody is actually training. And you know how it starts? It starts with very, very simple things like, why don't you get a picture just of lips? So you can identify a person only by a lip picture, right? So you don't feel that okay, it's going to reveal my family member's identity. You feel that it's not that risky. It starts with that. Now, when you post a picture like this in your, when you circulate it and when that picture gets attention, the validation creeps in that okay, what I'm doing is going to be, interesting, it's making me cool over there in that circle. So that's how the grooming thing works. And then they will, tell you that okay, now next level, now let's have eyes, and or let's go lower, so that's how it starts. It's not like directly they will say okay, go and get a complete picture. And also let me tell you that incest is not a new term. It has been in the society for ages. The only difference is that these were all behind the locked doors. Nobody would talk about it because of the stigma associated to it. But now becoming a little more acceptable in terms of, in the online world, you will find somebody who's going to validate that as well. So that's where the normalization is happening. So now you don't look at it as incense. Now you are going to look at it as typically sexualizing something. See, pornography has been and it will always be a very, very integral part of people's sexual journey. I mean, if you're not going to agree to it, that means you're fooling yourself.
Yeah.
We as a country has a ban on it, but do you know that how freely it is available on all the platforms? Forget the pornographic sites,
Yeah.
right? So it is so easily accessible that it does not feel to me that this is wrong.
So I was just going to come back to the pornography thing that you were talking about. It has been an integral part of our sexual lives, all of us. So pornography has always been around, as you also pointed out. But how are these platforms like Telegram or other social media apps change the picture in terms of access and influence?
So let's look at it this way, that earlier it was a pull content, as in you have to search for it. These platforms have made it push content. Even if you're not looking for it, it's so easily pushed to you. So platforms like Telegrams and all offer unlimited channels without cost, some with cost, some without cost, in the garb of anonymity, encryption, easy circulation, right? See, as a country, we have a very stringent law that if you are found circulating or storing these or capturing these kind of pornographic content, you can be punished. But these platforms are helping people to cover their footprints when they are circulating or when they are, creating this kind of content, and also widespread. Earlier days, people had to buy those blue film CDs and stuff, which was not easy. You have to go, you have to find the source, you have to. So it was a difficult, like I said, it was a pull content. You have to look for it. Today, you don't have to look for it. And if you look at it, even in pornography, now the threshold has changed. It's no longer what is popular is not those clips, but it's the live content. It's the content with violence. It's the content which is forbidden content, which is now easily being accessible and is what, being more attractive to users. So, yes, platforms are contributing big time. See, platforms are giving you the opportunity or technology. Now, what you're using for it for, so they are going to put their hands off saying that, boss, I have not created this circulating. But at the same time, they are not even, working towards identifying that content and flagging it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been, needing organizations like mine who have to fight bullying or, for women's safety and children's safety.
A lot of the content clearly targets women and victimizes women. So what do you think, do you think this impacts how young men and boys look at women?
It is shaping up in really not an appropriate manner. We are at one end talking about equality, inclusivity, but at the other end, the rise in misogynistic content, which outright disrespects a woman's modesty, character, all of this is being, normalized to such a large extent. In fact, just day before yesterday, I did a piece on where AI generated videos of women reporters are circulating and they are catching a lot of traction because, these are bikini clad women who are going and taking interviews. So it's getting a lot more attention, right? And what is it doing? It is desensitizing the users who at a young age are exposed to visuals like this. And they see that, okay, when everybody is liking it, how can it be wrong? So it kind of challenges their thought processes that, okay, is it really wrong or are we orthodox? These are the questions that young children are now raising, right? So that is the irony, that while we are fighting at one end for equality, objectification is largely of women, right? So and in terms of how it affects women, imagine that none of us feel safe. Like, look, I am a public figure, I have tons of my images outside. I know what the risk can be, but am I ever going to be prepared and okay about, like, okay, if one of my pictures is used and morphed or, using AI and nudified and circulated, it's going to be devastating, right? So it impacts from shame, guilt, character assassination, a lot of things we women have to go through. So
Yeah.
it's not at all easy for women also to, go through this kind of experiences.
Yeah, especially if we talk about young children. I mean, if young children are exposed to such things, be it sexual content or be it misogynistic content, how does it shape their psyche and how does it impact them in the longer run?
So the biggest impact is desensitizing them. Since early age, if they are going to be exposed to this kind of content, They are going to be extremely, extremely insensitive towards any other victim, any other woman victim or a female victim. They lack that empathy because what they have been seeing all through feels usual and casual and normal. So how do I know that it is going to impact somebody? So in a crux, what it does to us is that it desensitizes youth today who is being exposed to this kind of content, and it does not help them learn empathizing. So emotional empathy is missing big time there.
Yeah, and in your own practice, you must have come across, cases of boys and men struggling with the effects of this kind of exposure. If you could share one or two with us, what are you seeing on ground? What's happening?
So what we are seeing is very diverse. At one end, I do have, young children as my clients who have been, due to peer pressure, exposed to pornographic content or sexual content, and are struggling to, feel comfortable around it because they are at a junction where if they do not indulge into it, they face peer exclusion, and if they indulge into it, it's their guilt, it's their embarrassment that troubles them through as such. So that is one side of the thing. The other side, we are also seeing that today, because anonymously you can have access to it, a lot of people have started experimenting and asking for these kind of content also. Like I said in the very beginning, that anything that is forbidden becomes automatically very attractive. That no, no, I mean, I want to do some jugaad and have access to it, kind of. So that is also what is happening. That no longer am I content with the typical pornographic clips that you see. Now I want something which is more exciting, more thrilling, which is maybe live or, like I said, violent content, etc. So it is giving rise to these kind of demands also. So we've seen clientele on both the ends, and eventually they. So when they become my clients, that means that they are at a point where they want to correct, and it's a lot. It's a tough journey. So they do go through their different phases. It starts from feeling embarrassed and shameful, then it goes to anger and frustration that why am I not being able to do anything about it, and then it settles into a very, very low to depressive feeling of what have I done and what have I gone through in either cases. So that's their journey. It's never going to be easy and casual. In the beginning it may sound, but if you reach a point where you realize that no, this is not appropriate and it is impacting, because in the long run it is going to have impact. In fact, I've worked with clients who at a very early age, if they've been exposed to pornography, even if they're not addicted, it eventually changes their and impacts their sexual life going forward. It changes the way they connect with their partners. It changes the way they connect with their own bodies. So there is an impact.
Yeah, if you could elaborate a little bit on how this, engagement with partner, how is that impacted?
So again, there are see various factors. Now, let's say if you have been, or let me give you a client's example. Now, I have a client who has been, quite into watching of pornography. Now, when he wants to get intimate with his partner, somewhere that stimuli is missing, and so he has to go back to pornography, get that stimuli, and then get into it. But this is one of the cases. There could be another one where, what kind of content are you watching online? So now I have a client who with consent with their partners, would enjoy watching a little bit of masochist sexual content, like part of BDSM and all of that. Now, when it comes to indulging with their partners, initially, it is all new and thrilling, but later on, they lose that entire spark of, generally and normally getting intimate with them with respect, with, love and care, all of that. Now, your stimuli changes to now you want that power dynamics, you want that kind of, sadistic pleasure, etc. So, there are multiple ways in which it can impact us, depending on what you're consuming and how much you're consuming.
Yeah, and it must be massively impacting their emotional well-being, both of the person who is engaging and the partner, I'm
Yes.
sure.
A prolonged exposure will definitely have impact on your emotional and sexual well-being both, and it will also impact your relationships. See, let's understand that sex always begins first between ears and eyes, then it goes between the legs. So if you're not able to connect with your partner emotionally, you are going to have that challenge with connecting to them sexually. And that is where a lot of people gravitate towards different, getting stimuli out of different kind of content. Some get it via texting, some will be indulging into watching, etc. There are so many ways. Now, if the dependency starts that without this I cannot get stimuli, that's your red flag that you need help. So we have seen in a lot of cases that prolonged exposure, like if you're always watching this, if you are indulging into sexual content of different variety, then it is going to somewhere or the other start showing an impact on your relationship with your wife.
Yeah. Especially because I've seen a lot of, real life rape videos being circulated. When people watch such videos and get used to watching such videos, is it likely to, encourage them or groom them to even having, violent sexual fantasies, which will translate into real life as well?
Quite true. And it's quite possible, because what it starts doing is it starts desensitizing you. If you are exposed to the blood all the time, when you see the blood in real, it will not really make you feel that scared, that warm towards the person who's bleeding. And it's not just sexual content. Today, if you see our most popular video games, they are also violent games. So violence is not being, served to us just in one format. Yes, in different formats, and that is why today we have these all news about road rages and rages over internet connection, or children becoming aggressive and challenging their parents or getting physical with their parents for over the internet usage, and all of this is all part of this. Now it is going to the sexual violence also, with exposure to violent sexual content, because the more you see it, what it does, it starts wiring your brain that okay, this is what is giving me pleasure, and then you want to experience that pleasure in real life. So there are very likely chances that you may want to experience and bring it to the real life. So because you've been so insensitive, and you've not really taught to empathize with people who are going through this, it's pure objectification. So
Yeah.
it's likely that yes, they may want to experiment, right?
Now, if they take the two things together, this sexual content being very freely circulated online on various platforms directly into your inboxes through platforms like Telegrams and on social media, and then if we talk about also the increased misogynistic you know content being circulated online. Of course, young boys may not that be exposed to that so much, but if we put these things together and now try to look at a picture, then how does it look for women, for boys, and for the society at large? Is it worrying? Yeah.
110% worrisome. Uh, Gone are the days where content is being monitored. It is in the name of entertainment, whether it is in the name of getting quick attention. Sexualization is becoming extremely normal, and misogynistic content is also being circulated, maybe not always directly, but in different ways. So what it is leading, see, for a human mind, that clarity is required, that what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior, right? That is what helps us distinguish from right and wrong. But we are living in a world where our rights and wrongs are challenged every day. Sometimes through, so much of normalization of content that I start questioning that, okay, all this while I thought it is wrong, but the whole world is doing it. Like I'm just explaining it in a very simple language so that we understand that what I mean by normalization, right? So if you say that, okay, let's not burst crackers, but if my entire society is bursting, I am not going to feel that it is something wrong. And that's exactly what is happening. So since that content is available in different formats, it's whether it is in your movies, whether it is in your reels, whether it is in your chats, whether it is in graphics, whether it is AI generated content, it is around us all the time. So it does not feel something wrong, something inappropriate, or something disrespectful. And when we as a society, as in we as all the genders find it casual and normal, as a society, that's what we are going to reflect. This is now we are heading to a society which does not have boundaries. In the real world, societies have a code of conduct, but in the online world, it's missing. So, what we operate on from is the disinhibition effect that the online world gives us, where there are two effects. One is benign disinhibition, and one is toxic. Benign is where over trusting and oversharing, because you are in the comforts of your house and you cannot really, gauge that, okay, the person who I'm talking to, how dangerous it is. So that is where benign disinhibition comes in. And toxic, where because it is in front of screen, there's no code of conduct. I can get away doing anything because of the anonymity. So we have the trolling culture rise. So that is where lack of code of conduct, lack of boundaries is where we are heading to. And if any society that does not have boundaries, we cannot exercise freedom without responsibility. And internet is offering us a world which is giving us a lot of freedom, but nobody is there to exercise your responsibility and call you out if you do not exercise, right? That is where you see the cases of disrespect, cases of women being objectified, misogynistic content. All of this is on rise. So we are heading towards not really a safe space for women, and I would say today it's not even safe for young men as well.
Because you talked about responsibility and that internet offers freedom but no responsibility or accountability, then how does the role of social media companies how do you see the role of social media companies here? And do you think, as an expert on the subject, that there should be some accountability?
100%. And it's not just social media platform. Collectively, we all need to exhibit and take up responsibility and accountability. So let me say, as an individual, I need to know what's appropriate for me. So that's where my responsibility lies. Being kind and being respectful will never go out of fashion. And all that is required for us to do online is this. Number two, as a society, we need to not normalize misogyny. We need to take a stand, inculcate respectful behavior in our day to day lives, in our content, in our words, all of that, right? It should be in our behavior. So that's as a society. As an educators or, adults and parents and all, we need to teach this at the right age, right from the beginning, that yes, in the online world also there are certain etiquettes, there are certain ways in which we need to behave. There are certain age appropriate content that we need to consume, etc. So that kind of education and awareness comes from educators and adults and guardians. Then we move to the social media platforms. They also need to take that accountability that the content that they are allowing users to freely generate and circulate, somewhere it should be moderated, that this is what is accepted and this is what is not accepted. And they don't need to do much. All they need to do is align their intent of, people's safety over business model. It's the same algorithm. If I search for, let's say, one violent sexual video, the algorithm, instead of showing me similar, which it is doing right now, should it not be flagging off and saying that, look, this is harmful content? Correct? So it is the same algorithm that requires so the shift in intent. And that shift can come either from you genuinely wanting to choose human safety over the business model, or from regulation. So that's where we move to policymakers and government's role, that they also need to come up with stringent laws, stringent accountability for these companies so that they don't get away and put their hands off saying that no, we offer freedom. Freedom also is never freedom without responsibility. So that's where collectively all the members, all the stakeholders together can form a society which can become a safe space for women, children, and every other individual who goes in the online space. A lot of countries have started doing this, right? Like Australia has made a very clear stand on no social media access for a certain thing. In fact, in the UK, a bill is passed where social media companies are going to be held liable if if in any kind of cybercrime case, whether it's with the content, abusive content or sexual content, if the platform is found circulating or not taking action against it, then yes, they're going to. In fact, UK had one of the landmark judgments in where Pinterest was held liable for a young girl's suicide, where she had searched and saved a lot of videos to commit suicide. Now, that same platform could have, navigated that girl to a help center or something which could have saved her. So we are moving towards that, but I think collectively, if we do it, it can be enforced very well.
Yeah, and if we especially talk about India, because it's a huge country with, so many young people, especially, and we do not have digital literacy in most parts of the country. So, how do you see this as a challenge, particularly for India, and what can the policymakers, what would your advice be as an expert on the subject to the policymakers to do to, do their bit when
True.
it comes to track?
So, like you said, we are a young nation. That means we are maximum young population. And unfortunately, what has happened is the way internet has crept into our lives, into our daily lives, has been at such a bolting speed that we have not got enough time to catch up on literacy. So we as a country need to go big on digital literacy and awareness. That is one. But at the same time, we need to back it with solid law, a legal framework, policies in place. So our DPTP Act is one of the phenomenal ones. Enacting that, imposing that very quickly and very stringently is a wonderful move towards this. But yes, nevertheless, because we are also a democracy, in bringing about that change takes a bit of time. That is where sensitizing the users, that is your population, is equally important, and that can happen through literacy and awareness. If we start pulling our strings on the social media platforms also, in terms of, they complying to our data privacy act, they also complying to immediate redressal, like they are supposed to have the a help required in respective regions, but it's not easy. You try getting a content down, it takes a lot of time. So in all those aspects, if we start having very stringent policies and laws along with a very strong move on digital literacy and awareness, I think we can reach there very fast.
Yeah, and if I would ask, if I could ask you, how can we prevent young boys from getting into these circles? What is the solution to these problems? One is that the policy, we have to make our policy stronger. We have to hold platforms accountable. But on a more basic and more micro level, how can we engage with young boys so they are able to differentiate, as you said, between what is right and what is wrong, what is appropriate, what is not?
So that comes from good education and parenting, right? We need to have sex education as an integral part of education system. Cyber literacy or digital etiquettes as integral part of our systems. Because right now we are addressing sex education separately, digital literacy separately. But in an online world, they both come together. So we need to integrate these as part of your entire education journey and start early. We don't need to wait till children are in 8th and 9th, because in an online world, the online world is ageless, faceless, and sometimes even also gender neutral, right? So we need to start with digital literacy as early as maybe a class one, with also parenting support, because it's not like only the school teachers and you're sorted. No, how do we shape up children, right? It is through parenting and it is through education. Same things we have to do over here. So a classic example that we have is driving. Why does driving require you to be of certain age? You need to have a test. You need to give your test. You're taught how to drive, then you have to give the test. Only then you're eligible to drive. Something like this we need in the digital world also. We first need to teach children how to behave online, and including all areas, safety as well as respect, kindness, responsibility, everything. After education, let's make them aware of age appropriate content. So that is where we need moderation and regulation in place so that they are not exposed. It's not like we are not having young children driving or drink and drive cases, but the numbers are less because there is a legal framework in place. Same way over here also, we need consequences which are very stringent. We need legal framework which is absolutely non compromisable one. So a mix of education and consequence is where we can shape it up right from beginning. And even for parents, it's time to upgrade to digital parenting. See, today's challenges are very different than when we were growing up. As in, I grew up in 70s, and at that point, my parents had different challenges. But today's parents have different challenges. Now we are those parents who have grown up with our parenting ways, and all parents are 50% what their parents were to them. But in today's world, we need to upskill our parenting. We need to move on to digital parenting, where the need of inclusion, of creating an judgment free environment is very important in the house. See, earlier days, it was absolutely normal if parents were not your friends, and it would be parents' way and no other way. Today's children are not going to accept that because they live in a global world. They are exposed to different types of parenting environments. So we need to have a common digital parenting environment where you give them that space where they can openly share. They don't feel judged. They don't feel scared that, okay, my parent will take away my device or tell me not to go on social media. No, be part of their world. Upskill your parenting and upskill education. If we invest in these two from the early age, it's not possible that we cannot have a good respectful digital society.
Yeah, and finally, one now the talk about sex education is also has become common. I mean, everybody is talking about it, but it's I think it's limited to city, conversations around the city and metropolitans around the country, but not so much in the rural areas. So I think it's imperative also. How do you think to take it to the very grassroots into the
Absolutely.
villages?
Absolutely. See, the sexual education is as basic as any other education. It is your biological need. You need to understand your body better to be able to respect others. Correct? So it's not, and like you rightly said, that accessibility to sexual education is much more in metro cities compared to, deep down in the rural segments. But it is absolutely imperative because mobiles have reached everywhere. And it is one of the innate human need. So even before the mobile era, there were sexual content available, but yes, accessibility was not there. The demand was less, supply was less. All of this. Today, it has multifold, right? Right. So we also need to creep in. Where your device is going, you need to go there fast. You can't say that, okay, let me finish this segment and go. Go. So much of content is created, the CSAM content, which I mean is child sexual exploitative and abusive content, the material is coming from a lot of rural India. It is purely because of lack of awareness, lack of education. Also, one thing I would like to point that for a lot of people, we've seen that sexual education is only till the surface of good touch and bad touch. Let's move forward good touch and bad touch. You begin with that, but you have to take it to a level where they do not need they do not feel the need to go to a pornography school.
Yeah.
What is lacking in sexual education is you're not bringing in the pleasure element for which people are resorting to this. Yes, you talk about biology, you talk about, human body, science, all of that. But at the same time, you also need to include this so that nobody is left to explore that curiosity somewhere else.
Yeah, just like we have physical education teachers, for example, we can have sex education teachers in our classes.
And I think in India, it will be normalized if we take away the taboo from this entire sexual conversation. It is changing, but very, very much the change is only in a certain strata of society.
Thank you so much, Nirali ji. This was a very important conversation, and your insights, I hope, will be very helpful for the audiences as well. Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye bye.